Hey, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about the moments that defined my life, musically. I got interested in music at a very early age. The moment I obtained a Walkman, not a Walkman brand, but the kind of thing that no one knows what it is anymore, but it had outboard speakers that I could listen to on my desk because I didn't like to use headphones. And that was the moment that I started listening to music nonstop. I was probably somewhere between 6 and 8, maybe 9 years old. Listened to classical music nonstop. Later, the moment I discovered the Beatles and music of the 50s and 60s and 70s, rock and roll music, and that was not really listened to in my house very much, just a little. I think I felt a little bit like it was contraband, like my parents didn't like it, they liked classical music. My dad liked some Elvis and whatnot. But the Beatles were not encouraged, but I just fell in love with the Beatles and listened to them nonstop. Then there was the moment that I got a big old stereo where I could record my own cassette tapes off the radio. And that was a big moment because then I could find my favorite songs, whether it was a classical thing, which I recorded a lot of classical music off the radio, or if it was a Sunday morning Beatles show, there was a Sunday morning Beatles radio show I listened to a lot that I would record all the time and would listen back to on cassette tapes, and I had a rack full of cassette tapes. Then there was the moment somewhere along the way that I started hearing like shred and rock music, and I think this came after I played guitar. So let's back up. I started playing guitar when I was about 13. The moment was when my mom mainly encouraged me and my brothers to pick up an instrument at around that age, just to enjoy it and to be able to play. And I started teaching myself classical guitar from the Christopher Parkening guitar method with my dad's old classical guitar he got in Spain. I sounded really bad and was really embarrassed to say that I played guitar for a while. In all of these moments, I tend to be a very obsessive and compulsive person, and playing guitar came to be one of those later on, especially when I started to enjoy it after a year or two and like feel like I could make sounds that I liked. And I started to be able to play some of the things I heard on the radio, like the Beatles, and later Lynyrd Skynyrd was one of my favorites for a while to play. And then I discovered instrumental music, as I mentioned earlier, like instrumental shred, rock guitar, Joe Satriani, Steve Vai, Eric Johnson. And I remember at the moment that I stood in a Borders Bookstore, which existed back then, and they had these headphone stations that you could listen to like whatever on that was like a new release or I think a clearance or something, and Eric Johnson's Bloom album was on there, and where you could listen to it, I think. Yeah, because it was like 2006, and I decided to get an album of Joe Satriani and Steve Vai, and was it 2006? Maybe, who knows. And Joe Satriani, Steve Vai, Eric Johnson, the G3 CD that they also had, which I think I could listen to some, and the moment I heard that opening riff to Zap on the live album, I was just blown away, and I got into Eric Johnson in a big way just because of his tone. Like, lots of people could play fast, shreddy, impressive things, but no one had the sound that he had. And then there was the moment, there's no way that was 2006 because I was younger than this. Okay. There was the moment that I found out Eric Johnson was going to be in town, got my dad to take me, and Eric Johnson opened the show with Zap, with Tommy Taylor on drums and Roscoe Beck on bass. And the curtain went open and he played that opening riff after some, like, atmospheric weird otherworldly sounds like he does. And I felt like the back of my head just blew off, and I was so excited, like I was in nirvana. I didn't know what was happening. And yeah, it was an incredible show. And then my dad physically pushed me out of the show afterwards and berated me on the way home about how horrible it was and how we should have left earlier and how he was never going to take me to a show again like that or something like that. But let's save that for another video. So I got big into Eric Johnson. And fast forward a few years, I tried to play some things. There was a moment where I got my first electric guitar, which was a PRS SE Custom Flame Top. Contrary to what my parents thought, I didn't forsake all my classical guitar playing to just play the PRS. I did a lot of both and was always frustrated that I didn't seem to make as much progress on the electric guitar as I had on the classical, and just wasn't as good as I wanted to be. Fast forward a few years, and college happened, and I went to college for classical guitar, got a degree. Never really enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed the electric guitar, but I felt like I didn't have another option to kind of get where I wanted to go. I didn't have another thing I would have gone to college for besides guitar, and jazz was presented as the alternative, and I've never really been into jazz. And the other alternative was like Berklee School of Music, which is really hard to get into and really expensive, and I could not have paid for, and was not good enough to like get a scholarship for. And so those were the only roads presented. Spoiler alert, there are many other roads besides college or the military after high school, and many different ways of pursuing music besides going down a straight traditional collegiate path. And lots of those are probably preferable, mainly to not go into debt. After college, I started playing around at open mics with a friend, because I never really wanted to do the classical thing as a living, though I did a lot of wedding gigs and this and that kind of gigs for a while, and formed a band, and that was a defining moment, that I formed a band and then played the first public show, and then played the first public paid show. I think the first public show was at Copper Coin Coffee in 2013 on March 8th, and be sure to comment if you were there, please. And the first paid show was, I'm really not sure. Might have been Patty's Pub, which there's a million of, but this specific one existed at the time. So yeah. And we got a drummer and had a full band, and that was cool until it wasn't. And realized it wasn't what I wanted to do. It took me a long time to learn a lot of lessons, like that I'm not a huge fan of playing cover gigs, after playing a lot of cover gigs. And then there was the moment that I'd never really been a singer and never really done my own thing solo as a musician, not in a classical context, and I wasn't sure I could, but I wasn't happy with my band, and so I ended it in the hope, after a moment in which one of my students asked me to sing something that I couldn't at all, like it was break even by the script. And so I went back to take lessons from my old voice teacher from college, because I love to sing, and I sung a lot in college. And yeah, I started singing again, and then I started believing I could sing a bit, and then after I quit the band and wrapped that all up, we did an album. That was a cool moment, to release our own album as an EP, and got a song played on the radio. That was a cool moment, having been raised on the radio. But then I finally played my first show of my own original music with some other musicians that I had, gotten roped in somehow to play it. And that was a defining moment where it's like, yes, I can do this. I can put on my own show and be my own thing, be my own musician. And that was great. That was last January-ish, or maybe the beginning of February 2017. And then I started this YouTube channel, which was another moment where it's like, can I make YouTube videos? Yes, I can. In this chapter of branching out to just play more music, create more things, and really build this community of my music, and have stuff heard in the world, and hear what other people are doing, and connect to people, and just live this crazy creative life. And I'm doing more producing now, and that's another moment that I didn't know I would be able to do, that I'm learning to do, because after a while it turns out that you pretty much limit yourself. There's so many things you can learn just from YouTube. YouTube's great for that. And yeah, so here we are, the moment that defined my life in a few steps musically. You'll hear some of what I've been working on producing very soon, sooner than you might think. Why is this video so long? Who knows? If you enjoyed this, please like below and subscribe. It really helps me out to grow my channel. I know I'd love to hear what your defining musical moment or moments are in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Sign, a face of mind, a place I can't